Well, hi, everyone. I am your host, Mike Hingson, and welcome to another edition of Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're here with us. We really appreciate you coming and spending a little bit of time with us. And today we get to chat with Tyler Mills, who I find to be an interesting soul. Why do I say that? Well, he is a writer, among other things. And I'm really interested to hear about his book that he's written. He's a freelancer writer. He is also the owner of Mills Marketing Services, and he's worked on a whole bunch of political campaigns and in the political world. And I'm really interested in talking about that. I've done some things around Washington in the past and had a lot of fun doing it and met some interesting legislators and Congress people and so on. But sounds like he's done a whole lot more than I have, and I'm really interested to get into that. And I know he's very interested in talking about rural America, and we're going to do that as well. So with all that in the background, Tyler, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. How are you?
Thank you, Michael. I'm doing great.
Well, we really appreciate you being here with us. Why don't we start, as I love to do, why don't you tell us about kind of the early Tyler, growing up and some of that stuff?
Yeah, basically, I've grown up here in southeastern Iowa. I'm about an hour away from Iowa City, the University of Iowa, and it's a really great community to grow up in. I actually live in Keokuk, Iowa. We're right on the Mississippi River. Our main industry is high fructose corn syrup. So it's not necessarily everyone's favorite topic or favorite industry out there, but that's what we mainly do in Keokuk, Iowa. And I've actually done a little bit of work with people that have developed websites for them and in the past, and that's part of what I've done with Mills Marketing. And then I've also lobbied for different causes regarding disability rights and disability employment issues around Southeast Iowa.
So what got you interested in dealing with disability rights and advocating as you do?
I realized as I got into the workforce, so many people that are in similar situations as I am, they're either not getting the opportunities or they're afraid to break out and take those opportunities. I think it's a situation where the system is not always as conducive to employment as it should be. I think that there are a lot of employers who would be willing to employ more people with disabilities, but they don't know how to navigate the different barriers and parameters themselves. And I think they're scared. I think they're afraid that there's going to be liability in their facility. There's a lot of different elements there.
Yeah. Do you have a disability yourself?
A cerebral palsy.
Okay. So that's are you in a wheelchair, or do you have that much CP? Or
yeah, I'm confined to a wheelchair. Yep.
You are. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, my wife for her whole life was in a wheelchair. She didn't have cerebral palsy. She had scar tissue on her spinal cord at the T3 level. So she was a T3 para. And we lost her in 2022. We were married 40 years. So as I tell people, and I will always say, no matter what anyone says, she's monitoring somewhere. And if I'm not a good kid, I'm going to hear about it. So I got to try to make sure I'm a good kid.
Yeah.
Don't want to get in trouble with her,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But anyway.
And
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really in the last few years, I really started to look at the statistics dealing with employment amongst the disability community, and we've really made a lot of progress. And I don't want to imply that we haven't made a lot of progress, because we have, but we're still at around 23% of people with what's classified as a disability under the ADA employment, which is not bad. 23% is a lot better than I had previously been, but we really didn't even start charting those statistics until 2008.
Right.
So,
yeah, and I know the unemployment rate among employable blind people is still much higher than that, but still it is progress, and it's not at the 70% where it was when I was growing up and in college and just going from college to the workforce. So we're better, but we've got a long way to go. And, why do you think that is? Why do you think that we still aren't really in anywhere near the norm, like for people who don't have traditional disabilities?
People are scared that they're going to lose their health insurance by going out into the workforce. That I think is the main barrier. And I think employers are scared to offer certainly a full health insurance package to someone that is disabled. And then if you make a certain amount of money, you no longer become eligible for the program
For SSI, right?
That you need to survive.
Yeah. Well, but the other side of that is that typically in a group health environment, disabilities aren't supposed to be a factor.
You would like to think so.
Well, yeah, as I say, supposed to be. What I'm getting at is if you look at the paperwork and you look at the rules of typical group insurance, disabilities aren't included. That doesn't, they're not an issue, but that doesn't mean that they're not. But group insurance doesn't measure directly whether you happen to have a disability or not.
Yeah, it's really bad because I find that, at least I found in most states, we're down to basically one giant insurer for almost every single state. At least it seems to be at least in my research. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I do wish that there were more options just for anyone who was seeking private insurance, so they could be, as self-sufficient as they would like to be.
Yeah.
But basically, as great as the Affordable Care Act is in many ways, it really hasn't challenged the monopoly that we still have in the private insurance market. So, yeah, and
that's why I was real specific in saying the insurance I'm talking about is company group insurance, which is a little bit different in a lot of ways than typical private insurance and life insurance. Although none of us could get life insurance policies until the early to mid 1980s because insurance companies plain said we were a higher risk, and it took a major effort and enough consumers rising up to get state legislatures to pass a law that said that you can't discriminate against persons based on a disability unless you can show actuarial statistics or evidentiary data, and nobody's been able to do that yet.
Right, which is wonderful. But.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole story. I was very much involved in that. I actually led that fight. I was living at the time in Massachusetts, so I led that fight. But there are other aspects of insurance that are still issues in a lot of the kinds of other insurance other than life insurance that we would like health insurance and so on. You're right. It's still a major challenge, and it's all really based on prejudice, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that some employers also automatically assume that they can only get a half day out of us when we go to work, and depending upon how physically or mentally straining the work is, they automatically assume, well, I can only get a half day out of them, or maybe 3 hours a day out of them. And I think that we have obligation is not the right word, but I am, during my time in the workforce, I've tried to prove some of these people wrong, that we can do a full day's work. At least I've been blessed to be able to have that opportunity. So many people that would like to have that opportunity do not have the chance because they face a lot deeper challenges than I do. And,
right. And when I asked the question before about why is the unemployment rate so high, another part of the answer that I would give is, and it gets back to part of what you're saying in a different way, but we're not included in the conversation. We are left out. And you're right. Employers and so many people make assumptions. And we've had things like sheltered workshops that have contributed to that. And a number of agencies around the country, so-called rehabilitation agencies, have contributed to that by not really being strong advocates. And the bottom line is, though, that we really can work a full day. And for those people who physically may not be able to do as much as other people would be able to do, it also may mean that what we really need to do is to look at what the right job for them would be so that they could do as much work as anyone else. And that's also a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. And we were struggling with my internet, and we probably still are a little. That's another issue here in rural America. If you want to be able to work from home, you're still going to be struggling with your internet connection a lot of the time. So that was part of my book is about Death of the Blue Dogs. I want to people to understand what regardless of whatever your politics happen to be, you should want access to the internet so people can be working and be productive and be taxpayers and feel good about their day. And there may be some people that don't want to work, but in my experience, I've always felt like work and the dignity of work has given me a purpose, has made me just feel better about my day. And that may not be for everyone, but it certainly has helped me.
Well, I would also point out or submit that maybe for some of those people who don't want to work, again, even there, they may be prejudiced and thinking they can't work, and so they don't want to. And I'm sure there are some who just want to use the system, but I think there are a lot of people who haven't learned to have the confidence to stand up and really fight for their right to be in the workforce and in the system.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And another aspect of this is, I think, at least within rural America, I think right now within the country at large, I think the venture capital dollars are getting spent in, they're being too concentrated to one part of the country or the other. And if there was a way that we could convince people to spread that opportunity around a little bit better, I think that would be helpful as well. Yeah,
I'm sure that it would be helpful. Well, you mentioned the book. Tell me, what are Blue Dogs?
Blue Dogs are a group of moderate to conservative Democrats, and I didn't really want to write this as a partisan book. What I wanted to do is write this as a book saying rural America needs to elect legislators that care about their constituencies, that go out there and use and appropriate tax dollars to make sure that our roads are functional, to make sure that we have access to internet, clean water, schools with top-notch technology, so we can learn everything that we need to learn about to be able to be competitive in a global economy. Because basically, what happened, the Blue Dog Democrats were started in the early 1990s as a response to what many people viewed as, Bill Clinton being too liberal, and Bill Clinton did raise some taxes on some people at the beginning of his administration. So basically, there was a group of about 30 or 40 Democratic legislators who said, we've got to kind of create our own group and sort of like find a middle ground between what they considered to be too liberal in Bill Clinton and yet too conservative to jump to the Republican caucus. Mm-hmm. So they basically said, we're in the middle and we're being squeezed blue. So that's kind of where that term comes from.
Got it. It's interesting. I grew up, went to college in the 1970s and so on, and I've been a member of the National Federation of the Blind since 1972. And I remember going to several national conventions and also being very involved in dealing with things in Washington. And while one party is more conservative than the other, what's really interesting is that the emphasis on disabilities and supporting disabilities, at least to a degree, has shifted from the Republicans, who really were more champions earlier but are much less so now just because they've taken a completely different position about spending money and so on, but they're not the champions in general, that is, that the Democrats are.
And I would like to see the Republican Party get back to that, because if they believe in self-reliance and independence and making people feel good about having something to do in their lives and being as functional as they can be, this is a nonpartisan issue.
Well, it should be.
Yeah, non-ideological, because all you're doing is you're creating jobs. If someone with a disability can go out and become an entrepreneur, and let's say you hire 3 to 4 people, that really, it may not seem like much on paper, but it can make a big difference in a community. It really can. So I think that you can still have a sense of community and still be a rugged individualist at the same time. And I unfortunately, maybe within the Republican Party, they kind of right now only want that rugged individualism. And I think in order to have a functional society, you have to have some sort of a sense of community as well.
Well, I agree. I think we're losing a lot of our sense of community, and we become so fractured as a society that it's really difficult to talk and form community. And how do we get back to that? How do we get back to people being able to share ideas, to have legitimate discourse, and also have different opinions, and people respect that, so we can discuss them, but at the same time, we don't just blast everyone because they're different than we are. How do we get back?
We have to realize that our children go to the same public schools together. We still go to the same churches. There's still some people who still go to the bowling alleys together. Social media and social media marketing is great. I've been in that industry for quite a while myself, but we've kind of used that technology to go into our own little quarters, and we just kind of follow the road we want to follow instead of considering other points of view, considering what other people in the community might think. We kind of at this point want to hear what we want to hear, and I don't know if we always consider someone else's perspective. And many of the legislators that were defeated, that I write about in my book, Death of the Blue Dogs, they were kind of those people that were, kind of the cooling saucers of the Congress, and they would kind of consider those different perspectives. And that's what I'd like to see us get back to as a society, not just as, from a legislative congressional perspective, but as a society. Get that broader sense of community back, talk to each other again, because really we still go to those same schools, churches, wherever you might line up, and hopefully we can start to have that conversation again.
How do we get there, though?
You have to realize that we're all just human beings, and I think we've in some ways we've kind of like went, oh, that person listens to different music than I do, I must not like them. And I don't know where we got off base to where it's good, where we go, oh, that person has a different opinion than I do, I must hate them. I must at least dislike them or not want to communicate with them. I think we just need to the society and media accentuate the differences. When I think that even though you, Michael, have spent most of your time out in California and I've spent most of my time out in the Midwest, I think we'd find out probably quite a few things, regardless of politics or whatever. We'd have a lot of things just in common as basic human beings,
Well, I've been fortunate enough to actually have lived in several places around the country and traveled to many more. Mm-hmm. And I love the richness of this country. And I appreciate the different environments, the different areas, and the different points of view. And I think it is extremely important that we recognize that and that we respect it. But that sure breaks down in our times right now, at least, when it comes to politics. You can't have a political discussion at all without somebody just flying off the deep end somewhere.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you go to the cable news networks, they reward the people that are saying the most outlandish things, regardless of where one stands. The person that gets the most media attention is the person that says the the most sometimes unproven thing. And when you reward non-factual behavior or just straight up dishonest behavior, that I think that encourages society as a whole to go in that direction.
Unfortunately, we live in a country where, well, I won't say unfortunately, we live in a country that provides and allows for free speech, but unfortunately, we do sometimes see that carried to an extreme, as you're pointing out.
Well, and I think that that for some reason we consider right now we've got people, if you fact check someone, they consider it a form of censorship.
Yeah.
And I don't think fact checking someone and saying, hey, I have my research says differently than this, I'm offering this point of view, I don't think that's a form of censorship. But unfortunately, we've kind of gotten to that point where people think that that's censorship.
Well, and it is unfortunate that we've seen a lot of that. We do see the whole idea of fact checking, and some people just totally resent it. But the problem is they don't want to do anything other than do as I say, not as I do. And that's unfortunate too.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it does make it quite a pain to deal with, needless to say. Well, so what do we need to do? I know you've sort of alluded to it a little bit, but what do we need to do to kind of bring rural America economically back more into the fold than it is?
You've got to have people that don't automatically assume that we don't have the skills to get things done. I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of stereotypes out there about people and so some of these stereotypes are true, and life is about constant improvement. And if you're not willing to make changes and see how you need to improve yourself, how you need to improve your community, then you're not going to progress. But I think that there are a lot of people out there that look at rural America as, they don't understand. They're flyover country. They're not willing to learn. And I think in my community, I think we are willing to learn. I think we are willing to get better, but we have to prove ourselves that. Mm-hmm. We have to prove that to other people. I was watching The Daily Show one night with Jon Stewart, and a lot of people enjoy Jon Stewart. Of course, he's a very funny comedian, regardless of what your politics are. And he was making he was making fun of the state of West Virginia far too much. And if it was like, he was making fun of how they don't, their teeth, and they don't read enough. And it was just kind of like, John, you consider yourself someone who likes to highlight the plight of the working class from time to time. And then here you are, kind of going off on these people who clearly need help, clearly need assistance, and they need jobs in their communities. And I wish that we would get rid of some of those stereotypes and stop saying some of those hateful things about each other.
Yeah. And it is so true. Well, if you take West Virginia, for example, and I've read that, there's people there will drink a lot of soft drinks and so on, and their teeth aren't great and all that. And there are issues like that, but there are also other factors that really cause some of that to be the case, aren't there?
There are. I wish that that people would actually go to some of these communities more often. I wish that, people were able to travel more and to learn more about why, if you look at the history of West Virginia, it wasn't really the best place to even put a state. That's a worthwhile debate. So can you really blame that on the people that live there now? As far as economic development, as far as, and we're in a lot of these communities, smaller communities, they're controlled by one employer. Once one employer gets locked into a community, they can kind of dictate whether another employer can come in. because they're afraid that they're going to lose their workforce if this other employer comes in. And that's another, the monopolistic practices, or I'm not sure what the exact wording of it would be, but it's certainly a controlling process for a lot of these communities, because they're afraid to lose that one major employer. And then what do they have?
And they're afraid to lose, or they think they would lose their identity.
Absolutely. And I think work, and some people would disagree with me, that they would say, well, Tyler, you should just find more leisure time, find more things with your leisure time, and not worry so much about work. But I think that the people that are encouraging a society without work are often some of the most successful people in society that don't have to worry about it anyway. I worry that people, regardless of their politics, they figured the game out. They figured the world out. They know how to make money. They know how to, pretty much get anything they want. And then they're going to say, well, just sort of pat us on our head.
Right.
And just sort of say, well, you shouldn't have to work anymore, or you shouldn't worry about that stress anymore. And in some ways that would be a good thing. But in some ways I need that stress. I need that challenge.
Well, and I think that's the real operative part of it. It's challenge. We as a race tend to like challenge, whether we always admit it or not. We do. We like challenge, and we like to have things that we have to overcome. And for those people who have, quote, made it, that's real lovely. But the problem is they tend to forget along the way what it took to get there. And the result ultimately is that they don't really help people like they can to get other people to maybe work like they did and get there as well.
Yeah, and AI and all these different forms of technology are going to be absolutely wonderful for so many people with disabilities. But we've also got to consider, if you've got a bit of a cognitive disability, are you going to be able to catch on to this AI technology as quickly as you should? And are these programs going to be are there going to be funding for to go to a community college in a smaller community where someone could learn how to use this technology better? I think that some of the people that are creating the technology are not thinking of me in rural America or other people in rural America that have disabilities. It may take us a little bit longer, and that it's going to be, we might pick it up 4 or 5 years down the road, but those 4 or 5 years are going to be rough,
Well, yeah. And AI in general is so new that we really miss out on thinking in the more long-term approach of what it will and can become. And of course, now we've got so many people who are going, oh, it's horrible. It's going to take all of our jobs away. Kids are just going to use it to create all their papers and so on at school, so they're not going to learn anything. And from my perspective, hearing those kinds of comments tells me you're really missing it, and you're not recognizing the value that AI really brings to the world. So, for example, for the classroom, if children are writing their papers and just letting AI do all the work, you may or may not be able to tell it when you're grading the paper. But the thing to do is to maybe get creative and think about a little bit different way of teaching. For example, when you assign students to do a paper, and especially you're concerned that they just may be letting AI write it, Chat GPT or something write it, the easy thing to do is take one period of your class and have all of your students individually come up and take a minute and defend your paper. And you'll know very quickly who really understood it and who used it all the right way or not.
Yeah, I mean, when I was going through school, we would, the teacher would kind of read the whole book to us, and instead of having us read out loud, and then you graduate high school, and then you're like, some of these kids can't read, and then it's like, well, where were you in the 7th grade checking to make sure that they could read?
Well, yeah, yeah. And I think I've had some teachers that all they did was parrot the book, which is not what a good lecturer should do at all. The book is the book, and the teacher needs to really add value to that process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that you don't always see, which is also the case. My belief is that a good boss, if they're really exercising leadership skills, a good boss has to work with each person in their team and figure out how the boss can add value to make them more successful, rather than just focusing and telling them what to do and not being involved anymore. That's not leadership.
Exactly.
So I think it is important that, we need to, again, look at all of that. Mm-hmm. Well, so it is pretty clear to me that what you would really like to see us do is shift some of what we're doing in our priorities, like in the political spectrum and so on, to be a little bit more moderate, and not be one side or the other necessarily. How do we do that?
We actually,
how do we convince people that we got to go back to a more moderate environment?
We look at people's resumes. We look at people who actually consider different points of view. I back in 2015, 2016, I worked for a guy named U.S. Senator Jim Webb. He was from the Virginia, and he was a Vietnam veteran. He ran as a Democrat for president, but he also served in the Reagan administration. And the thing about Jim is, when I first met him, basically in the past, some candidates that I'd met were a little bit hesitant to work with me because of my disability. But because of Jim's background as a veteran, and he dealt with people with disabilities before, he was very, very inclusive, very, very receptive to not only me, but also all points of view. And I think that if people honestly just want to take the time and listen to good, moderate people, regardless of whether they have an RD or anything else behind their name, part of it is, I think, it is our attention span. I don't mean to be insulting to people by saying it's an attention span issue, but I don't think that they take the time to listen and say, hey, this individual is considering more than one side of the coin, more than one point of view.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it really gets down to, you got to spend time thinking and strategizing, and not just reacting, and recognizing there's more to life than just one opinion.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's the thing about the people in this book. These were people that, were getting votes from people that didn't necessarily agree with them ideologically. But what they would do is they would take the time to listen to other people and to help people with their social security matters, or help people with, making sure that their son was able to apply for that Pell Grant, or their daughter was able to apply for that Pell Grant. And so, even though you didn't necessarily line up with everyone on an ideological basis, a lot of people would still cast their ballot for them, and because they would actually do the work of what a congressperson is supposed to do, in my opinion. And like we were talking about earlier on Fox News or on any of the cable networks, I think that people, again, are rewarded for being loud instead of doing the work of what a member of Congress is supposed to do.
Yeah. And it's tough to get enough people together to deal with that kind of vision. And so the result is that when you get, as you pointed out, people who may be a little bit more moderate, or people who want to really make contributions to society as a whole, they drop out because they feel like they've got just too many things stacked against them, and there are just too many people who don't want to listen.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of my book during the CNN debate, and Anderson Cooper was questioning Jim Webb and some of the other candidates about the Americans with Disabilities Act. And Senator Webb had made the point in the past about affirmative action possibly not considering income enough. as far as making sure that people had opportunities. Well, Anderson Cooper implied during that debate that Jim Webb was anti-ADA. And I kind of went, I highly doubt that many of these other presidential candidates have people in wheelchairs and dealing with a lot of other disability related issues on their staffs right now working on their campaigns. And here's Anderson Cooper telling me that my candidate might be anti-ADA. And that just kind of, it took me back because I think that it's the responsibility of a journalist to actually dig deeper into someone's writing, their public statements, everything about as much as they can before they make some outlandish question or comment like that. And I think it's just some of it is a lack of responsible journalism because you're trying to get ratings, you're trying to get the headlines there instead of actually digging into the issues that people are going to need in order to be able to survive.
So you've talked about the Blue Dogs being involved in rural America. The question that comes to mind is, aren't they just as important for the big city and non-rural America?
Yeah. And that's the thing is back in the 70s, when people were trying to get the farm bill done, they would make sure that provisions were in there to, create more farming opportunities in urban America. So there weren't food deserts. There are food deserts in urban America too. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you elect people that don't care about a farm bill, that don't want to earmark resources to a community, they want to act like they're just going to save money on this or that, when really I don't think there's that much savings going on, because I think a lot of countries are running debt. They've always been running debt. And I think it's not that debt doesn't matter. Debt absolutely does matter. But at the end of the day, if your people are living in a food desert because the farm bill is not, the resources there are not properly, allocated, that's an issue that's far deeper than a structural, spending deficit.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've got to figure out a way to bring a little bit more sanity to the process. I guess we've seen these kinds of cycles before, though. Mm-hmm. And the hope is over time, we'll be able to see maybe the cycle shift and we bring a little bit more sanity into the whole structure. But it's going to take somebody who's a really strong leader who understands that, who can make it happen. And I'm not sure that we are seeing any of that even today in society. We have two political candidates, and I think one is closer to that ideal than the other, but I'm not sure whether we have anyone who really is strong enough or sophisticated enough to outsmart and bring about the kind of changes that we're talking about.
Well, the thing that frustrates me, and one of the things that frustrates me, is that some of these people that were elected to Congress are now seeing their communities die out. Mm-hmm. They're losing population. You can look at the statistics. These are not made up statistics. These are proven statistics. A lot of these rural communities are losing population at alarming rates, and yet these people are continually getting rewarded by getting elected again and again. Wouldn't they want to see their communities grow? That's my question. It seems like a false way of thinking here, because a lot of these communities are dying out, and yet you're getting rewarded by getting reelected or given a higher position in some sort of organization. And I'm like, you are losing population in your community at an alarming rate, and yet you're bragging about getting, whatever you think done. To me, you would want your community to grow and prosper.
Well, I would think so. But again, what we find is people's priorities are a little bit different than I think what we would believe would be the ideal.
Yeah. And it's frightening because, the goal of of any society. It should be to help as many people as you can reach their full potential.
Yeah.
And if rural America and in parts of urban America, absolutely, if they're not getting resources allocated to them, there's only so much you can do completely on your own in this world, in my opinion. And without that sense of community, I think a lot of people are being left behind, and it's extremely unfortunate.
Do you think that we'll be able to see a shift and we'll find more moderates coming back at some point?
We have to find a way to punish the media for what they do. They encourage they want people to start yelling. They want people to start yelling at each other. It's like a professional wrestling match, Michael. It's not like, we've basically got talk radio in the halls of Congress now. Instead of saying, hey, you're a human being, I'm a human being, I have constituents, you have constituents. We literally have members of the United States Senate, threatening union leaders, saying, you want to fight? You want to have a fist fight?
Yeah. Yeah. And, well, again, what do we do to change all of that? And you're right. The media is certainly a part of it. One of the things that really frustrates me is that we have these things when candidates for president, for example, get together, they call them debates, but they're not debates.
No.
I'm not sure. I don't remember the Kennedy-Nixon debate. And so I don't remember whether it really was a debate. But I'll bet it was closer to a debate than anything that we see today, because we're not really seeing any kind of good, real, legitimate debate discourse.
No, it's soundbite after soundbite, and attack line after attack line, and the questioning is set up that way, and I understand why they do it, because they want viewership. They want people to be talking about, this candidate said this candidate, now we're going to talk about it for the 24-hour news cycle, and then we're going to move on to the next news cycle. And instead of having a substantive debate where people can discuss issues and actually solve, internet connectivity in rural parts of urban America, we end up with a debate over, whatever space lasers or whatever, so.
Well, and the other part about it is that I think in reality, with a legitimate, real debate, you would have just as much to talk about, and it would still allow for all of that to happen. Yeah.
So maybe they need to give more airtime to it. But again, that attention span, that I think partially because of technology and the way things have changed for better or worse, people don't have that attention span anymore. And I'm just as guilty as anybody. So
They don't have that attention span. I hear people talking all the time about making videos to put up on YouTube or whatever. And I am told constantly, it's got to be 30 seconds because people won't pay attention for any longer than that. Mm-hmm. Yet, what content can you really do in 30 seconds?
Nothing. Mm-hmm. Nothing of any substance.
Or very little of any substance anyway, which isn't to say that you want to have a video that's 15 minutes or a half hour. It's got to be something that makes sense. You got to keep people's attention. But I have yet to see, if you do it the right way, where you can have a 5-minute video that doesn't keep people's attention if you do it right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'll listen to a good podcast, and just like we're doing right here, and if it really gets my attention, and then I'm gonna come back for more. And I think people, hopefully they enjoy that sort of thing still, and really embrace it. I certainly hope so.
We have typically made these podcasts an hour long, and I've had the opportunity to be interviewed on a variety of different kinds of podcasts, and I've been lectured not about mine so much as other people say, well, no one's going to listen to a podcast if it's an hour long. That's why we only make ours 15 minutes or 20 minutes, or at most a half hour. And yet when they ask questions, they don't really ask questions much less do it in a way that creates content and does what they really ought to do, even if it's only a half hour long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I wish that content could be more substantive. I think you're spot on about that. No doubt about it. So.
Yeah. So we have seen changes come about, although sometimes it isn't perhaps in the ways that we ought to. I mentioned earlier sheltered workshops, and there's been a big battle in the blindness system about the fact that all too many rehabilitation agencies and other entities push so many blind people into sheltered workshops, and those workshops have a way where they don't have to pay even minimum wage. And they've played some really strong games with that. But there's been a lot of visibility about that. And so a number of those shops have actually changed their model. But what do we do again to get the Congress to really deal with it? Or is that asking the same question we've asked so many times already during this conversation?
I think it's up to the private sector. I think the private Congress right now is at a standstill, and I think that they prefer their permanent standstill. I've spoken to HR professionals, and my degree is actually in human resources. And a lot of these HR professionals are not aware of the different programs that are out there, and they're not aware of the tax credits. It's not that they're not willing to learn. I just don't think that was part of their program. I've worked at a call center now, for over 8 years. I'm still, obviously there are all kinds of disabilities out there, but I'm still the only person in a wheelchair out there after over 8 years. And I don't know I hope it hasn't been my own performance that has discouraged them from hiring other people with disabilities, but because that really would upset me, but it would.
Sure.
But you would think that someone else would have come across the line during the time I've been out there. Because even when I got out there, they're like, you're the only person in a wheelchair I've ever seen. And they'd been working for other call centers before. And I was like, this is call center work. This is one of the most obvious things that people like me can do.
Yeah. And it's easy. It doesn't require an incredible amount of physical labor. And there are actually some good technological ways that a blind person could do that. It does take some additional kinds of things given the typical call center software, but the technology is there to do that today.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever had the chance to work with different call centers about that kind of technology, but apparently some of them still need the help. So
they do. I know of some, and I've dealt with some that actually have put the effort into it, but still, I know what you're saying. But then it gets back again to the whole idea of we're not included in the conversation. And I think that mostly when it comes down to dealing with people with disabilities, we don't think about it that way. We don't think about we're not included in the conversation, and we don't necessarily really deal with that. And when I'm talking about the conversation, why isn't the president every time he, or possibly in the future she, is talking about one thing or another, that they don't just talk about race and gender, they also automatically include people with disabilities and use examples? We're not included in any of those conversations.
Well, I think unfortunately we're given absolutely necessary social programs. There, disability benefits, Medicaid, different things are absolutely necessary for survival. But I think people just sort of like make sure that their tax dollars go to that, and then they think, well, we it's not that they think we've done enough, but they think that we are making sure that these people are able to stay alive, and maybe in their minds that is enough. But for you and me and other people that think about this on a deeper level, we want more, and Are we being selfish? I don't think so. But no.
Yeah. Well, so we've talked a lot about work. Does society value work? Is that
No,
changing?
I don't think so. And as much as I embrace new forms of technology, I think that I think a lot of our drug problem, and particularly in rural America, is because you don't have some of those, you're not giving some of those menial labor jobs to the regular working class anymore. You're letting the technology do it, which is fine if you want to let the technology do it. That's completely your prerogative and your perspective. To just sort of move, the self checkout thing, and that's fine if companies want to go that route. But I think at the same point, there's a value to getting that person who may have been struggling in life, to get them at a local grocery store, be it a Costco or whatever the case may be, instead of having a self checkout. Does it hurt a company's bottom line? Absolutely. In many ways it does, but I think that we've lost a sense of that
Yeah.
real purpose of work.
Yeah. Well, and you cut out a little bit, so maybe you can repeat some of that because you cut out for a few seconds.
The internet's going out like we were talking about earlier. Just again about how it is. I think it's important to still have uh, the part of that is the loss of the sense of the community, is because we use the technology now that it can be very, very helpful. But at the same time, if you give that job to a person who was previously struggling and not able to find their way in life, maybe struggling with fentanyl or struggling with some sort of drug related issue, now that they can have a job, they feel better about themselves. They can get a paycheck and be a larger part of society. Um, Obviously, we'd rather have them, getting an advanced degree and moving on to that larger scale job, and hopefully they would be able to do that in the future. But I think society doesn't value, having a someone to check out your groceries, or someone to, wash your car or mow your grass, or some of the menial jobs that are going to be eliminated here in the future, and in many cases have been eliminated now. So we're as beautiful. Technology is going to be great for us. It's going to work in so many great ways, but we also don't look at the other side of the coin enough either. So.
Well, the other side of that, though, is let's take self checkout. Here in California, for example, when you used to talk about if you have to hire somebody, does that affect the bottom line? It does. But what we're also discovering is that self checkout is affecting the bottom line because there are too many people who cheat that system. And the result is that they're able to get out without paying for everything or whatever. So there are challenges all around. And again, what I'm hearing you say, and I think there's merit to it, is that what we're really not doing is representing enough the value of giving people the opportunity to have jobs and encouraging them. And the companies aren't tending nearly to be as loyal as they used to be for people and working. And you're right, they're going to technology and everything else, and they're not being loyal like they used to be. You don't see the same loyalty. Mm-hmm. Hence, people move so often from one job and one company to another job and another company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you have people investing in your company, they're just looking at the profit at the end of the quarter. They don't look at they see that profit in their stock portfolio, which is fantastic as well. Anybody should be able to play the stock market, do whatever they want. But again, if Walmart turns a massive profit by eliminating 15, 20 jobs at their different operations, what kind of larger impact does that have on a local community? And that's a question that should be asked. Now, we might come to the conclusion that that's overall a good thing. I don't come to that conclusion necessarily, but I think it's a conversation that needs to be had all the time. So,
And it's like anything else. How do we get that conversation to occur more often?
Well, I think, again, I think we've kind of lost our sense of, I don't, but when I was growing up, I think that people were just not nicer to each other. I don't know if it's because people just think they can say whatever they want to each other.
Yeah.
Now that we're behind a keyboard, we can just be agree or disagree. We should never be as just unkind and be calling each other stupid and uninformed. And we need to consider all different perspectives as much as we can.
Yeah. We should. And I really would love to see a world where we could have a lot more discussion without somebody becoming offended, because discussion is always valuable if we really have a discussion and can, if going back to using that term, debate something.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But, so do you think more people with disabilities ought to move and be involved in more rural America? Would that be a beneficial thing?
I think it would be beneficial. I think if we there are a lot of extremely compassionate people here. I think that just because people assume just because a certain community starts to vote a certain way that they've lost their compassion. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think you've got a lot of compassionate people here who love to help other people. They're not necessarily voting the way they're not actually voting their values. Mm-hmm. They're extremely compassionate people, but they're not voting that way. So then people who are voting the opposite way assume that they don't care. I think it's a lack of information. I think we've got as much information as we've ever had at our fingertips. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if we're actually on a search for knowledge within that information, so.
Yeah, we don't know how to search. We don't know how to, or oftentimes it seems like we don't want to get that information because it's the usual don't bother me with the facts. Mm-hmm. And that's unfortunate.
And I also worry about, a lot of these bigger banks and bigger companies are able to swallow up the smaller banks in the smaller communities. And so again, the capital dries up. That's really important. I don't understand completely why some people who would consider themselves more conservative aren't worried about antitrust laws if they truly want those rural communities that they represent to survive. The reason why I wrote this book is because I see a lot of people who are elected to represent rural America are letting it die out, and I do not understand why. And that's what I tried to explore in the book, and it boggles my mind, and I could write 15 books on it, and it would still make me go,
Well, your voice still needs to be heard out there, and people need to hear, I think, what you're saying. It certainly is a very relevant and valuable viewpoint. And we've got to get to the point where we can have a good discussion and good interaction with each other. We've lost the art of conversation all the way around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's because we text each other and we message each other in shorthand, and we don't really. I don't think we have those same kind of full-length conversations that we used to have.
One of the things that I do regularly when I'm looking for speaking opportunities, and I've looked at some databases, and I will send out emails and talk to people about becoming or hiring me to be a speaker. I love it when somebody responds to me, and even if they say, I'm the right person, we're not doing anything right now, but they leave a phone number, because I think it's so important to be able to reach out to people on the phone. Email is so insensitive, and texting, of course, there's nothing like communicating with someone on the phone. And I know that a lot of times I've been able to get speaking engagements because I was able to actually have a phone conversation. And some people have even gone so far as to say, most people don't call me. I really appreciate the fact that you called me and took the time to let me get to know you better. And whether we have anything right now or not isn't the issue, but thanks for at least initiating the phone call.
Yeah, you can talk about why you care about a project more. You can really go into detail as to why this, you think that this particular situation, whatever you're working on, would really help benefit everyone involved. In a
Yeah.
text message, I don't think you can necessarily lay out that kind of emotion,
Boy, you certainly can't lay out the emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just isn't there. Well, Tyler, this has really been a lot of fun. We have spent an hour doing it, and I have no problem with that. Just
Okay.
so I really appreciate your time, and I really thank you for being here. And I want to thank you all for listening. This has been a lot of fun, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. Everyone out there listening and watching us, I hope that you've enjoyed it, and that you will let us know what you think. Please feel free to email me, Michael H.I., Michaelhi, at accessibe, accessibe.com. And we'd love to hear from you. We'd love if you, whenever you're listening or wherever you're listening, if you give us a 5-star rating, please rate us. Tyler, if people want to reach out to you and interact with you more, how do they do that?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Tyler Mills. Type in Tyler Mills Marketing Services. Also, my book is on lulu.com. That's where I get the most money for it, to be honest. Amazon.com, wonderful site if you want to get it there, but I only get 37 cents on Amazon. But so if you can go to lulu.com, Death of the Blue Dogs, Tyler Mills, if you want to learn more about my book, any of the projects that I have to do with Mills Marketing Services, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook, Mills Marketing Services. I'm available. I got my phone number, email, everything. So I'm good to go.
Cool. Well, we put links in the cover notes as well. So the show notes, so they'll be there. So again, I want to thank you all. I really appreciate you, Tyler, taking the time. And if you know of anyone else who ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, and for all of you out there, if you know anyone who you think ought to be a guest or might be a good guest, I want to hear about it. We're always looking for people who want to come on and tell their story and talk about what they do. So please, by all means, refer people to us. I think it would be great, and we would love to talk with them and explore them coming on the show. So once again, I want to thank you, though, all for being here. Tyler, I want to thank you for being here. This has been fun.
Thank you for the opportunity, Michael. I really enjoyed it, and thank you for letting me speak to your viewers.